All right. So today we're going deep on something pretty fundamental.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd agree.
Mm-hmm.
How we talk to each other, basically.
Yeah.
How we communicate and all that entails.
It's a big one.
It is a big one. And we've got a great source, actually, that one of our listeners sent in called The Science of Effective Communication by Ian Tohovsky.
Okay.
And we're going to kind of go through it and pull out the most, I think, useful stuff, the immediately applicable stuff to help all of us listening, I think, be better communicators in all aspects of our lives.
Right. And it's interesting, I think, right off the bat, that the book sort of posits that effective communication isn't this sort of like mysterious talent that some people just have.
Right.
It's more like a skill set,
Uh-huh.
a collection of techniques that anyone can kind of learn and hone.
Right.
And he really emphasizes that even if you've, felt challenged by communication in the past, you absolutely have the potential to become much more effective.
That's encouraging. For people to hear,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm just not good at this,
Yeah.
Right. And for you, the learner especially, this is great because you're all about getting good at things in an efficient way.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is going to be a shortcut for you to really kind of up your game in this area,
Yeah.
whether it's for work or personal life
Yeah.
or just, feeling more comfortable in any situation where you're talking to another person.
Right.
So let's break it down.
Okay.
And I guess like a good place to start is this thing that like underpins all good communication, which is
Listening.
listening.
Right. Yeah.
So let's talk about listening.
Yeah. So the book kind of rightly identifies listening as the bedrock of effective communication.
Right.
And it goes beyond kind of the usual active versus passive thing.
Right.
He sort of introduces this idea of critical and reductive listening.
Okay.
So critical listening is kind of like your internal fact checker, like you're analyzing the information as it comes in.
So if someone's presenting data or making an argument,
Yeah.
you're kind of evaluating, is this is this legit?
Yeah, like, does this hold water?
Okay.
And then reductive listening is focused more on like extracting specific pieces of information.
Okay.
So it's less about the overall message or emotional tone and more about...
So almost like if you're quickly scanning like a news article for a specific date or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Or a statistic.
Okay.
That's kind of reductive listening in action.
Makes sense.
And then, of course, we have active listening,
Yeah.
which we all, kind of know and love.
The gold standard.
Yeah, that conscious effort to really understand, summarizing, asking clarifying questions, showing engagement,
Right.
and then passive listening, which requires a lot less mental effort. You're just kind of taking it in, but not necessarily
Right.
processing it very deeply.
Now we always hear like, always be an active listener.
Right.
But the book makes a point, which I thought was interesting, which is sometimes passive listening is fine.
Yeah.
So when would that be the case?
Well, I think, not every interaction requires this kind of intense engagement,
Right.
If you're in a casual environment, maybe overhearing a lighthearted conversation,
Right.
passive listening is often sufficient.
Okay.
And what's interesting is he cautions against getting too formulaic with active listening. He says, if you're so focused on checking off those active listening behaviors,
Right.
like nodding constantly and saying,
Right.
you can actually distract yourself from truly grasping
Yeah.
what the speaker is trying to convey.
It's like performing listening rather than...
Exactly.
Yeah.
It becomes a performance.
It's a good point.
Rather than actual understand. And he even goes so far as to say that if you're not in the right headspace to genuinely listen,
Right.
it's more respectful to just sort of disengage.
Yeah.
Rather than offering this kind of superficial semblance of attention.
Right. Which I think you're all guilty of.
Oh, for sure.
Sometimes. Where you're kind of like, yeah.
Yeah.
But you really think about something else.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So now moving on from listening, which is sort of like, I guess, the foundation of good communication.
Yeah.
Let's think about another really critical element of how we come across, which is our voice.
Right.
Like, it's not just the words we use, but how we say them.
Yeah. Our delivery.
Our delivery, yeah.
The tone,
The tone.
pacing, all of that.
Tuning up your voice. I like that.
Yeah.
And the book kind of emphasizes that. Like, a voice that's audible, clear, and easy to follow is obviously essential.
Right.
And it's encouraging that he says, even if you have an accent you're kind of self-conscious about,
Right.
that vocal training can really improve how well you communicate.
Yeah.
So that's good.
It's encouraging.
The ideal voice, according to him, carries assertiveness and expressiveness.
Right.
So it kind of reflects confidence, what you're saying.
Yeah, and that assertiveness isn't about being like loud or aggressive.
Right.
It's about conveying a sense of conviction and clarity in your delivery.
Yeah.
And he has some really nice like practical exercises.
Oh, let's hear it.
For kind of developing these qualities.
Okay.
One is as simple as like loosening your lips.
Okay.
You know, because clear enunciation is so fundamental to being easily understood.
Right.
And he suggests like reading aloud
when
you have some private time.
Right.
And really paying attention to the physical movements of your mouth, your throat, your chest.
So like feel it.
Yeah, as you're forming each word.
Yeah.
And that can really help you kind of build that muscle memory for clearer speech and can even help with overcoming like speech impediments, like a lisp or something.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so loosen your lips. What else?
Next is learning to breathe from your diaphragm.
Interesting.
Yeah. You know, people who project authority and calmness tend to breathe deeply from their abdomen rather than taking shallow breaths.
Right, from their chest.
From their upper chest, yeah.
Right.
And if you notice, like when you breathe, your shoulders rising and falling a lot, you're likely doing that upper chest breathing. So learning to engage your diaphragm, you know, you can practice this by like placing a hand on your stomach and feeling it expand as you inhale. Yeah. It gives your voice that richer, more stable quality. Which again projects that kind of authority and calmness.
Okay, I'm trying to do it now.
Yeah.
It does feel different, like more grounded.
Yeah, it takes practice, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
Another one is varying your pitch.
Oh, yeah.
You know, a monotone delivery can be so hard to listen to.
It's the worst.
And it can convey a lack of like enthusiasm or confidence.
Right.
So, you know, conversation has a natural rhythm and melody.
Yeah.
And learning to modulate your pitch, you know, even in subtle ways, can really keep people engaged and convey that kind of, sense of confidence and authority.
So you're saying like almost like sing-songy kind of?
Well, not sing-songy, but just like allowing some variation. Yeah,
allowing the natural kind of rises and falls to happen.
It's not just one note the whole time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then finally, he talks about speaking rate and timing.
Okay.
You know, there's no one perfect speed.
Right.
But a measured pace is often perceived as a sign of confidence and thoughtfulness.
Okay.
Most people speak between like 120 and 190 words per minute.
Oh, wow. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I wonder what mine is.
Yeah, you should time yourself.
Okay.
Reading a passage or something.
I'll try that.
And he says, you know, fundamentally changing your speaking speed is hard.
Right.
But just being mindful of it, particularly in like important conversations, can be really beneficial.
Just like consciously slow down.
Yeah, you might consciously choose to slow down.
Yeah.
To emphasize a point or just to allow your message to land more effectively.
These are good tips.
Yeah. All right, so moving on from the voice, I want to talk about this thing that the book really emphasizes, which I think is so timely, which is the power of face-to-face interaction.
Yes.
And this whole idea that, you know, we live in this increasingly digital world.
Right.
And that's having a huge impact on our ability to communicate well.
Right. And he makes a really compelling argument, I think, for the power of face-to-face.
Yeah.
Even
also,
though
all these other ways to communicate. So how does he suggest that, like, too much online communication can hurt our conversation skills?
Well, one key thing is that it can impair our capacity for deep listening.
Okay.
You know, in the online realm, we're constantly bombarded with stimuli.
Yeah.
And, you know, a click away from something else vying for our attention.
Totally.
And that can lead to shorter attention spans.
Right.
And a desire for, like, quicker, more immediately gratifying interactions in the real world.
Makes sense.
Secondly, it can foster a degree of, like, intellectual laziness online. You know, it's easier to disengage from challenging viewpoints.
Or offer like quick, unsubstantiated opinions without having to like really construct a coherent argument.
Yeah.
Or fully consider alternative perspectives.
You can just log off if you don't want to deal with it.
Exactly. You can just log off.
Right.
So there's not that same kind of like immediate social accountability
as in person
that exists in a face-to-face conversation.
Yeah.
And that ease of disengagement, I think, also hinders our ability to navigate and resolve conflict effectively. You know, online disagreements can so quickly devolve into people talking past each other or resorting to harsh language.
Right.
Whereas in person, you're often kind of compelled to confront and work through those disagreements in a more constructive manner.
Yeah.
And then furthermore, that kind of constant connectivity
and
that stream of online information can make it harder to maintain focus and presence
Yeah.
in real life face-to-face situations.
Right.
It's almost like our brains are being trained for constant
Microdoses of stimulation.
microdoses of stimulation.
Microdoses of stimulation. Yeah.
Yeah. I know I find myself instinctively reaching for my phone even when I'm in a conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
And he also highlights the impact of social media.
Yeah.
With its often highly curated
Right.
and idealized portrayals of other people's lives.
Right.
And that can so often lead to social comparison and feelings of envy,
Yeah.
which can negatively affect our well-being.
Right.
And by extension, the quality of our in-person interactions.
Right, because you're kind of coming in with that baggage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas, real unedited conversations provide a much more authentic and nuanced understanding of other people's lives, including their challenges and vulnerabilities.
It's like the highlight reel
Yeah.
versus the
whole film.
whole film.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what's the remedy?
Well, he suggests a digital detox.
Uh-huh.
Consciously making an effort to disconnect from screens
Right.
and prioritize real-world in-person interactions.
So put the phone away.
Put the phone away.
Go talk to somebody.
Yeah, and he even gives this simple piece of advice, which is if you have the opportunity to get up and speak to someone nearby,
Yeah.
A colleague, a family member,
Right.
choose that option over sending an email or an instant message.
Even if they're right there.
Even if they're just a few feet away.
I'm so guilty of that.
Yeah, me too.
Emailing someone in the next office.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Okay. Digital detox. Good tip.
Yeah.
So now I want to move on to another big thing that I think gets in the way of a lot of people communicating effectively, which is fear.
Oh, yeah.
Fear of judgment, fear of rejection.
Right. It's huge.
It's huge.
Yeah.
So the book addresses this pretty directly.
It does, yeah. And this is really, a key aspect of communication psychology.
Yeah, okay.
That fear of being judged can be so debilitating.
Oh, my God.
Especially for people who experience social anxiety.
Right.
But he offers, I think, a really valuable shift in perspective. He encourages us to concentrate on the elements that are within our control.
Right.
Things like expanding our knowledge base, cultivating interesting qualities,
Right.
rather than fixating on uncontrollable factors.
Yeah.
Like someone else's, fleeting opinion of our appearance.
Yeah.
Why invest mental energy in something that you can't influence?
Right. It's such a good point.
Yeah.
It's like worrying about the weather.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he also suggests redirecting our focus outward.
Okay.
Shifting from self-consciousness to genuine curiosity.
About other people.
At the people that we're interacting with.
Right.
When you're truly engaged in learning about the person you're talking to,
Right.
their experiences, their viewpoints, you're less likely to be trapped in your own head worrying about their potential judgments.
Right. It takes you out of your own head.
Right.
Yeah.
Plus, you discover that, everyone else is just as complex and, yes, imperfect
Right.
as you are.
Everyone's got their stuff.
Yeah. It's a great way to kind of humanize everyone around you.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And then as far as judgments go, he reminds us that the vast majority of judgments that people form
Yeah.
are never actually voiced.
You'll never know.
You never know.
Yeah.
You know what a passing stranger on the street
Thought about your shirt.
thought about you or your shirt or whatever.
Yeah.
So why expend all this energy worrying about something
You don't even know about.
you don't even know about? As they say, what you don't know can't hurt you.
Right.
And then when it comes to the experience of rejection, he presents this really empowering, I think, way to look at it.
Okay.
Rejection can feel so personal,
Oh, yeah.
especially romantic rejection.
Yes.
But he shares this anecdote about being, turned down for a date.
Okay.
And his initial assumption was that it was based on his appearance.
Like he wasn't attractive enough.
Right.
Yeah.
But then he kind of lists all these other plausible reasons for the rejection.
Right.
Maybe the person just wasn't looking for a relationship.
Right.
Maybe they didn't perceive romantic compatibility. Maybe they were already in a relationship.
Right.
Who knows?
Right.
And the takeaway is that not all rejection stems from this negative evaluation of you as an individual.
There could be other stuff going on.
There could be a million other things.
Right.
And I think recognizing that
Yeah.
allows you to kind of process rejection with more perspective
Less about you.
and less self-blame.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk about, I guess, the most powerful tool we have for connecting with other people, which is empathy.
Right?
So how does the book kind of talk about empathy?
Well, he argues that empathy is really the glue that binds human relationships.
Okay.
It's not just about intellectual understanding. It's
Right.
about actively striving to enter another person's frame of reference.
To see it from their side.
To see it from their side, to comprehend their situation
Yeah.
on both an intellectual and an emotional level.
So it's not just about getting it, it's about feeling it too.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so how do we demonstrate that then?
Well, he outlines a few practical strategies.
Okay.
One fundamental thing is to consciously avoid speaking negatively about others
Okay.
and to maintain a generally non-judgmental tone.
Right.
If you're constantly gossiping or criticizing,
Yeah.
it creates this environment where other people are going to feel hesitant
Right. They don't trust you.
to be vulnerable with you because they're worried that they'll become
The next target.
the subject of later judgment.
Right.
Another key element is acknowledging and validating someone's feelings when they share something significant,
Okay.
even if the content is, surprising or unsettling.
Right.
But a crucial caveat here is to avoid making the conversation about your own emotions.
Okay.
So the focus should stay on the person.
Don't make it about you.
Don't make it about you.
Yeah.
It's about really being present for their emotional experience, rather than kind of shifting the spotlight to your own reactions.
Right.
And then when you do find common ground, he
Yeah.
advises proceeding with sensitivity.
Okay.
So, resist that immediate impulse to jump in with your own Me Too story,
Oh, yeah.
unless you're explicitly invited to share,
Right.
prioritize their experience first.
Right.
And he gives this funny example of someone trying to commiserate with a friend about missing out on an apartment,
Okay.
but then just immediately launches into this detailed account of their own similar experience from years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And the friend's like, well, okay.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to tell you about my thing.
Yeah, yeah. I've been there.
It's so easy to do.
It's so easy to make it about you.
Yeah,
Even when you mean well.
exactly. Even with the best of intentions.
Yeah.
And then finally, he reminds us that engaging in these deep, empathetic conversations
Yeah.
can be emotionally demanding.
Sure.
So it's important to allow yourself time to decompress and prioritize your own well-being afterward.
So even though you're focused on the other person,
Yeah,
you still got to take care of yourself.
exactly. Empathy takes energy.
It does.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I want to talk about this thing that I thought was so interesting, which is knowing when not to share.
Right.
Like there was this whole section in the book about this.
Yeah, letting go
Yeah.
and resisting the urge to verbalize every thought
Yes.
that pops into your head.
Yes, exactly. And this is such a valuable skill.
Yeah.
I think it's so overlooked.
It is.
Like we've all been in conversations with people who just have to interject all the time.
They can't help themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he identifies a bunch of common reasons for this urge to interrupt.
Yeah.
So what are some of those?
Well, one is the desire to share a similar personal anecdote,
Oh, yeah.
often with the intention of showing empathy or connection.
Right. Right.
But it can actually derail the conversation.
Yeah.
Other times, it's this need to correct a minor factual point,
Oh, yeah.
even if the correction doesn't really change the overall message.
Right, right. Like who cares?
Yeah, who cares?
Yeah.
There's the temptation to interject with a witty remark,
Okay.
even if it disrupts the speaker's flow of thought.
Yeah.
There's this urge to ask a question about a topic that the conversation's already moved beyond,
Oh, yeah.
.
Going back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, there's the ever-present inclination to offer unsolicited advice.
Oh, God. Unsolicited advice.
Yeah.
The worst.
It's a conversation killer.
It is.
And he points out that unsolicited advice is often met with resistance.
Right.
Sometimes even outright rejection.
Right. Even if it's good advice.
If it's good advice.
People don't want to hear it.
Yeah, they don't want to hear it if they haven't asked for it.
Right.
And then there's the tendency to answer rhetorical questions.
Oh, yeah.
Which of course, as he clarifies, are meant to stimulate thought, not elicit a direct response.
Not to be answered.
Not to be answered. So how do we cultivate this ability to be more discerning
Okay.
about what we share and resist those impulses to interject?
Yeah. How do we not be that guy?
Right. Well, he has a few suggestions.
Okay.
One is to consciously practice pausing with a thought
Okay.
before you say it
Okay.
and just critically evaluating its value to the conversation.
Right.
You know?
Is this really necessary?
Yeah. Is this actually necessary? And you might be surprised how many of those thoughts are
Just random.
relatively insignificant and don't really need to be voiced.
Yeah.
He also recommends seeking honest feedback
Okay.
from a trusted friend.
To how annoying you are.
Yeah, about your interrupting habits.
Right.
And maybe even establishing a subtle nonverbal cue that they can use to gently signal.
Like a little cough.
Yeah, like a cough or,
Okay.
a raised eyebrow or something
Yeah.
when you're kind of over-participating.
Right. That's good.
So it's less confrontational than having to verbally correct you in the moment.
Right. That's a good tip.
Yeah.
He also emphasizes that, each of us experience this constant stream of thoughts
Right.
throughout the day,
Mm-hmm.
and the vast majority of them are fleeting
Mm-hmm.
and don't need to be shared aloud.
Right.
So learning to kind of just observe a thought
Okay.
rather than feeling this compulsion to express it
Right.
can be really helpful.
Yeah, just let it go.
Yeah, just let it float on by.
Right.
And then finally, he talks about the importance of discretion.
Oh, yeah.
Knowing when to refrain from gossiping or sharing confidential information.
Right.
And he underscores the harm that gossip can inflict on reputations
Oh, yeah.
and the unethical nature of spreading, unsubstantiated rumors.
Yeah.
So sometimes the most effective communication is knowing what not to say.
Right. Very true.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to move on to another really, I think, important aspect of this, which is repairing relationships.
So the book has some interesting advice on conversations that can help mend strained connections.
Yes, this is a topic that a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah, for sure.
And he outlines kind of a 3-stage approach.
Okay.
The first and most crucial step is to honestly assess your own attitude.
Yep.
You need to genuinely be willing to prioritize the relationship
Right.
over your own need to be right.
Right.
And to let go of any lingering resentment or bitterness.
Right. You have to come in with the right mindset.
Yeah, you have to come in with the right mindset.
Not defensive or accusatory or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The second stage is to initiate contact.
Okay.
And he recommends a carefully crafted, I've realized, email.
Okay.
This email should express thoughtful reflection on the period of separation,
Right.
any insights you've gained,
Okay.
without demanding immediate answers or assigning blame.
Okay.
And it should conclude by suggesting a phone call or a face-to-face meeting
Right.
to reconnect, while also acknowledging that the other person
Might not want to.
may not be ready or willing to respond.
Right. So you're kind of putting yourself out there.
You are putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Takes courage.
It does.
Yeah.
And then the third stage is the actual meeting.
Okay.
And he advises addressing the underlying issue early on,
Okay.
if necessary,
Okay.
but with a clear focus on mutual understanding and moving forward,
Right.
rather than rehashing old arguments or assigning fault.
Right. It's about like actual resolution, not just like.
Exactly.
Like-
Not just sweeping it under the rug.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he gives some good tips too for kind of nurturing revived relationships.
Yeah.
Especially long distance ones.
Right.
Which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
What were some of those?
Well, he talks about offering reassurances of your appreciation for the relationship,
Right.
practicing openness and sharing,
Mhm.
managing conflicts through video calls rather than just text.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Engaging in shared online activities like games or watching movies together,
Okay.
maintaining a positive outlook in your interactions,
Right.
offering advice when it's sought,
Right.
and then leveraging shared social networks for mutual support.
Right. So it's about staying connected even if you're not physically together.
Exactly. Yeah. Actively investing
Yeah.
in the connection.
Those are good tips.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about this feeling that I think a lot of people experience at some point in their lives, which is what he calls outsider syndrome.
Right.
Like that sense of not really belonging or feeling different.
Yeah. And he identifies this as a real, deficiency in our basic human need for connection.
Okay.
And, experiencing chronic isolation can have significant negative consequences
Sure.
for both our mental and physical well-being.
Yeah. So how do we break that cycle?
Well, he offers some concrete ways to kind of disrupt this cycle of feeling like an outsider.
Okay.
And the first is to really get over any aversion you might have to small talk.
Really? Small talk is important.
Small talk is so important.
Right.
These seemingly trivial exchanges
Right.
are actually vital social lubricants.
They signal that you're open.
They signal that you're open and approachable.
Okay.
Initiating these brief conversations about neutral topics.
Of the weather.
Yeah, the weather, a shared interest.
Right.
In common areas like the break room or before a meeting starts,
Right.
can be really effective at kind of breaking the ice.
Okay.
And he emphasizes that consistency is key.
So not just like...
Yeah, not just like once in a blue moon.
Yeah.
Like making that sustained effort.
Over weeks.
Over weeks.
Months even.
Months even, yeah. And really seizing opportunities
Right.
for these brief interactions.
That's a habit.
Yeah, it's a habit.
Okay.
He also recommends actively expanding your general knowledge base.
Okay.
So reading widely.
So you have something to talk about.
So you have stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
You know, it gives you more potential.